Wausau to order. Do you have any public comment or suggestions, or would an interested party or two want to speak when we get to that topic? Very good. Hearing none. Everybody had a chance to read the minutes. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Motion to approve,
Move
please.
to approve, Mr. Chair.
A second. Wait on their end. I can see your arm jerking up. Second by Mr. Neal, I think, was a little quicker. Yeah. Okay, all those in favor of approval of the minutes for February 3, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. And we do have, heck, we got two city attorneys. So if there are any questions regarding item number 4, our action approving the execution of lease agreements for the two parks, we can entertain those, but basically it's renew what we have in place. So we'd be looking for a motion to approve and we can discuss. Mr. Gisselman, second. Mr. Nutting, any comments or questions? Pretty straightforward. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. And that will go on to council at their next meeting. And floating separately are the leases for the Radke Point Park and that Grace field that is almost in Schofield. But where airport officials are talking with Schofield officials about that one. Discussion and possible action regarding Riverside Park soil testing locations. We are about to make a decision on that, I believe, today. Praise the Lord. And I looked at the maps, and I still think common sense dictates that we do some testing out on that open area. The test proposals that or the site proposals that we were given leave 2/3 of the open area in the south end of the park untested, and I think that's, a major area of concern. And so, comments from the committee, how do you feel about the proposal we have? Do you want to do more, do you want to do less?
Mr. Chair, I do kind of, gravitate down towards the, that parking lot area, not the parking lot itself, but, further, if that's kind of southeast in direction, I can't really tell from looking at this, but, we've got the proposed test location up there further north, and I don't know if that might be, at least that one, and maybe even the one closest to it, those two, might be out of our, areas of, chief concern. Mr. Killian had sent us a graphic showing, had a lot of wavy lines, showing drainage, and from where that culvert is, it's right by that, looks like number 18. I saw, a lot of drainage that goes sort of, to the south and east, maybe a little bit less so to the north. But we might benefit from concentrating a bit more down there, since that seems like where we're getting more drainage, and it's been our kind of our focus in a lot of our discussions. It's been a little bit further down in that area.
Okay, we have a professional engineer in our midst. Mr. Lindman, could you tell us what the thinking was? I know you looked at drainage patterns and all that kind of stuff, so.
Yeah, so I primarily looked at, like, when you look at the map up here, these two, as you come down, this is kind of a low area, so this is shedding water down here. This is another low area, looks like water travels back through here. This is kind of out in the middle of the park area, and then there was another one located right here, outside or kind kind of to the northeast. But if you wanted any of these moved, we can do that. We can put them over here by, in the open area.
Is that one furthest to the north there, is that kind of there based on our last discussion when we talked about possible runoff coming from the street that goes into the park?
Right, yeah, that was brought up, so I had kind of taken a look at where the contours were and maybe some flows coming out through here. This is a little depression area right here. Looks like water might hold right there. But if you want to spread them out and, do it over here, if you want to add a couple, it's up to the committee on.
Mr. Lindman,
Yes.
what kind of distance is there between those points? It's deceiving to look at the map. Is it
Yeah, it really is.
like 20, 30 feet, 40 feet is,
I really couldn't tell you. I don't know what the scale of the map is at this point, so I don't know if they're a couple 100 feet apart or.
I guess it would be a couple hundred feet. Did you finish with your question?
yes, sir.
Okay. I was wondering if stormwater washed into the park area from the area of the culvert outfall, where are the contaminants that stormwater might carry? My sense would be that they would kind of keep going toward the river, but would they go down and then sideways?
No, I mean, the contours like this area up in here, this is all a bit higher area. So, a lot of it stays here down along this bank, which has been tested, and down below the culvert was tested. As far as dioxins, at least the information that I've read and what Clara had stated was that they adhere to the soils where they're at pretty tightly. If you get a lot of soil erosion, you might get them carrying from one place to another, but just general runoff. Probably wouldn't carry them too far unless you actually degrade that soil and carry that soil down, so.
Okay. If we could opt, I believe, to increase the number of tests, but if we're going to stay with 4, I would favor taking that top one, swinging it down into that area.
Okay.
And I think we'd have it covered pretty well, but the other committee members have any thoughts?
Well, I'd be interested in Mr. Lindman's, opinion on that particular area you pointed to, or is it more, a little bit closer to the, the hilly area? Like maybe between the 2 green dots, the one that's by the parking lot and the one that's closer to the culvert? That area in there, or do we not have enough information on that area? Yeah, a little bit closer to the hill, right in between, there you go. That's going to be a lower spot, right? And
Yeah, it seems to be. I mean, when you look at the other 2 that were done on either side of that one that's just down from the culvert, I mean, that one down from the culvert had the highest TEQ value. None of them had any exceedances, and so we can do another one that's pretty high density testing right next to each other. We're certainly able to do that. If you want to add one, if you want to, whatever you'd like to do.
I guess I'm kind of backtracking and wondering if that one that's a little bit further north might be giving us some valuable information that we don't really know about, as much about that area, so. I'm kind of, I'm thinking this looks good at this point. Be interested in Mr. Killian's appraisal and hope we can, look at it and make a determination.
Any other thoughts? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have a big void area there, and we've got 2 red dots that are fairly close together. Maybe we could simply move the one dot that's out in closer to the river a little bit further down into that area there and have it tested, because we've got a good-sized blank area there that nothing going on. And we wouldn't have to add another test, just move that one a little bit further south and out where the people are actually going to play. That's the grass area. More people are going to populate that, I think, than over in this neck of the woods and so on, closer to the hill. That's pretty much brushy.
So like move this one over over here, Dennis, is that what?
Yeah, move it a little bit further down, almost, a little bit further down where your laser is, about down in that area there somewhere.
That's been my area of interest, is do the testing where people are going to be.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
That way we're not adding another test, all we're doing is moving the position of the one that was proposed.
Okay.
Mr. Killian, your thoughts? Or anybody else who's,
It's pretty fancy, yes. Tom Killian, 133 East Thomas Street. Thank you it's been a long path, and thank you for getting to the point where we're tackling this testing and the locations. I just had a few comments on locations based on the last meeting, and so we had mentioned the 4 sites or locations, and that seems very reasonable to me and to us. One thing we had hoped could be done is in the locations, at least the ones, and I can use this perhaps in a minute to show you, on the depths, if we could get kind of a surface sample as Dr. Zhang had mentioned, I think she had referenced around 2 to 3 inches, but also one at the depth, the base of the A horizon, which is often between 6 and 10 inches. And I think since we've come to this point after all these years, one thing that's not really clear in the neighborhood is we found exceedances around the neighborhood, and most of them have been at the base of the A horizon. And so I think just looking not only at the location, but the depth, if that would be within city budget, I think it would be very worthwhile at this point to do a surface and at the base of the A horizon. That sample that's farthest north, well, it could provide maybe some good data when we contrast the others. The main concern had generally always been around this area of the where the culvert is and where the runoff has been. Now, it looks like REI or Mr. Lindman was aware of this the way they did these dots, but those samples that were the highest in 2006, those were higher. Waleco took a whole bunch around the neighborhood, maybe 35 to 40 if I recall, and those samples right there were higher than any sample they took. So they could not come really close to that, even by taking samples directly in the railroad. Now, the culvert discharge was one sample, and the culvert inlet and the culvert discharge. Now, I just bring this up for locations because those names make it seem like those were taken very close together. Like you've got the culvert inlet, and then a few feet away you've got the culvert discharge, and that's what I had thought until I saw the pictures of where those samples had been taken. And the one they call the culvert discharge was actually kind of down the hill by a tree at the base of the hill. So those were taken quite far apart, and I think that's significant because it does, whatever the source, it does seem to indicate that in that drainage pathway, that those are where the higher levels were. So just to be very concise about our recommendations, we had hoped you could work in the 2 depths into the sample location, perhaps strike the northern sample there. This one is very close to where ponding had been from runoff. We can give you the photos and videos of the runoff area. If that could be taken in that former ponding location, I think that might be some valuable data. Now, this sample right here, we recommend moving it to the west, closer to the edge of the forest, closer to where we took our sample, and it came back to be the highest out of the 3. And what we didn't have at that time was a surface sample in that area. And then lastly, and I think this is probably the most significant request, is between the culvert inlet and the culvert discharge, placing a sample location between those points, okay? Because one, that's where the highest level of dioxin was found in the entire neighborhood. Two, that's at a steep decline there. So if there would be an exceedance there, it runs into the park. So that would be something I think we'd want to know if that was possible. And, you know, Mr. Peckham and Mr. Lindman had brought up this area. I mean, perhaps that's useful to contrast with the data that's near the forest, but these elevation lines, and Mr. Lindman can correct me if I'm mistaken, but right here, that's actually the most elevated area in that section of the park. So it's like this podium, you know, if I dumped a little Mountain Dew right here, it would essentially run down the slope. So these areas around it is actually where the runoff concerns would be. So wouldn't expect much of an issue here. It would be along the forest, and those would be kind of our requests on this if that's something the committee and city could accommodate.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Well, as Mr. Killian was suggesting, that one red dot near the two, just to the north of the culvert, were moved closer to the woody hill. I don't know, because that gets it awful close to that one green, so we've got sort of nearby testing. And where it is right now is in a more grassy area where somebody might be more apt to hang out. So I'd be curious to know, and that might just be Mr. Lindman, you know, when people go there to do the borings, they might just say, well, maybe 10 feet this way or 15 feet that way, which makes the best sense in terms of what the land is doing and what the usage of it might be. Regarding the borings themselves, I mean, I thought we had been told that they will be, you know, we'll have the opportunity to have, like, you know, that 2 or 3 inch depth and a 6 or 8 inch depth within the boring to look at. Is that true?
That wasn't initially in the proposal that we had. I mean, we've always just been taking one sample, and typically, as Tom had said, at the base of the A horizon, which is usually around 6 inches or so below surface. So if you want us to take a look, each of these samples from the lab, I think is about $700-800, so we could do.
It seems that, you know, that the first 2-3 inches are the most disturbable, you know, whereas
Yep.
6 inches down, you'd really have to be digging to get down there.
Right.
And part of our concern is, you know, the ready contact potential for something that's like right there at the surface, essentially. So, I mean, at least if we do those borings and we can take, you know, a ring from, you know, 2.5 inches or whatever, and another ring from, like, say, 7 inches, that
Yep.
might be good. That would address the A horizon question and also, you know, the surface, you know, concern.
So if we did 2 tests per boring, is that going to jack the price up by $700 a pop?
Yep.
Okay.
Is that just with those circle ones, not the square ones, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And I guess my logic, and I get your thoughts, Mr. Lindman, I was looking for our tests to be some distance from the tests that were just done by the Citizens for Clean Wausau. And they did, you know, near the bottom of that hill, so I thought we would move out from that, having established what they are in that general area, go out further and, you know, further afield and find out what's out there.
Yeah, I guess some of the thought processes is if we did move, you know, from what the previous testing was, we know what the values are, and so as we move into the park then, are they declining? You know, are those values declining? I guess that was my thought process anyway when I selected these locations, not to test right next to or, you know, within 20 feet to the existing test, was trying to get the boundaries and determine, are we declining as we get into the park, so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm comfortable with those locations, and I would agree with Alder Smith's question to move that one dot where he had pinpointed it, and these are going to give us a good description. My concern had been earlier that that very top dot was closest to the old road, which used to enter the park from up above, which is no longer usable that way, but that was my thought, was what was running down from the upper street and into the park. But I'm comfortable with these locations. That top,
This one?
yes, that was what Alder Smith was suggesting.
Okay. Are other committee members comfortable with it?
So again, Pat, which one are we moving? This one we're moving up? Or
I
this
thought we
one?
were moving the one that was farther north.
This one here, or this one?
I thought we were moving that one further down.
Okay, I thought you were suggesting the middle one.
You know,
That'd be fine with me.
we have to keep in mind that we're trying to find out if areas are polluted. We're also trying to find out areas that are not polluted.
Right.
So, I mean, this is I think we're losing our focus. We're strictly focusing on finding areas that are polluted, which we have to and which it makes common sense. However, we're also like to find out if we've got areas out there that are not polluted, don't have any problem, so we know those areas are safe. I think we have to know that also. That's why I suggested moving that one down, but that may come back totally normal, who knows, or as normal as it gets around here.
So you take the top one and move it toward the center.
Well, I would take the top one and move it down, take that one and move it down around in there somewhere.
Yep, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Good with the rest of the committee?
So that's the only one that's being relocated,
At this point,
correct? Okay. Okay.
thoughts, Mr. Killian?
Thanks. Thank you for allowing us to give our input. I think without some of the requests being accommodated that I mentioned, our group could not support this testing plan, and it would not resolve our concerns. So there would need to be a sample between the culvert inlet and the culvert discharge taken at both the surface and at the base of the A horizon. And then we had discussed at the last meeting, I believe this is on video if you go to public access, that what we had done was taken it was a very limited sampling event near the forest, okay? We took 3 samples, and that trying to define the extent of this, I mean, we're working with a challenge right off the bat when we say there are going to be 4 locations. So even in the area, the runoff area near the forest, you have a very large area. So that's a limiting factor right off the bat. But we were comfortable with that number if we're going to actually look for hot spots and not test in areas that have very little indication of ever being problematic. And just respectfully, we have a very solid batting average on the southwest side when it comes to documentation and industrial contamination. So the reason that there are boxes where the DNR is making the city test, that's from Waleco's air deposition study. Now, why did Waleco have to do that? Because of our group's research, okay? So when 3M air violations, when the public was notified that on the front page of the Journal-Sentinel, that was from our documentation, okay? So each time on the southwest side, when there's been a contamination issue in the recent past identified, it has been based on very surgical research from our group. So we can tell you with a good degree of certainty that the elevation areas that we believe need to be tested, because they haven't been in decades, it would include the area between the culvert inlet and discharge, and it would also include another sample in this area that is taken at both the surface and at the base of the A horizon. And I understand that this costs the city money, but also understand that just to do that limited sampling and to do some other efforts in the area, people working in middle-class neighborhoods pooled their money they really didn't have, to do that for the community. So I think at this point, it is very reasonable to heed our request so that the community can feel comfortable. And really, it's not a lot of money to ask of the city at this point based on past performance.
Is the area, Tom, is the area where you want that test up by the inlet accessible to the public?
It would be, as it's not fenced off, but the main concern there was the level that had been there. when that was sampled in 2006, and it's a very steep incline that's just dirt, okay? So if that was not running into the park, and I know there's been this argument that it's really bushy at the bottom with weeds and so forth, so that's not an issue, but if that is a source area of contamination, we'd kind of like to see it dealt with finally.
If I might ask, Mr. Killian, you're requesting a testing site there, basically in the middle between the discharge and inlet of the culvert. The DNR square box there seems, relatively nearby. Do you find any kind of redundancy between those two sites, or do you find them fundamentally different?
A little different. I think that's a great question. I'm glad that that test is occurring there. But what we've seen, and it could be, there are so many variables, it could just be that in 2006, hey, that was 14 years ago, and the levels over time waned. That could be one possibility. But because just above there at the top of that incline, the levels were roughly, 4 to 5 times higher than what we saw at the base, I think it is possible that we could see some real disparities in numbers there.
And it's possible that, if I'm using the wrong language, I'm sorry, but there might be, if we find elevated levels there in your proposed testing site, it might be the result of sort of pooling, and we find that it's elevated there, but it's lower than the inlet and lower even than the discharge. There might have been pooling, and it might be an opportunity to just get some dirt out of there.
Right, I mean, I can't say for certain, but it seems like if there would be any areas with elevated levels that there probably would be some cost-effective way just to deal with it. I think you've talked about that, Mr. Nutting's talked about that. I think everyone on the committee has that perhaps capping or excavation at just a lower level, not a real profound depth, but just to, if there's an area with exceedances and elevations, just to deal with it in kind of a straightforward fashion.
Mr. Killian, is that area that you're talking about, is that in the tree growth, heavy growth area? And so I'm just trying to picture
Yes.
it again. So you're actually wanting somebody to go into that brush and
That's correct.
Capture there.
It looks like a forest area, but if you go in there, it's actually mostly dirt in that forest area. And whatever industrial structures had been demolished over there, they never really removed a
all
lot
just
of the
grown over.
debris. So it's dirt, it's metal, it's bricks, it's things that likely we don't know what they are, but it's a pretty soiled and industrial spot. So if it wasn't at such a steep incline, I wouldn't have a concern, but clearly whatever there does run down into the park.
Just one more question, I'm sorry.
Wait, let me get clarification on, you're proposing a test of the surface soil between the inlet to the culvert and the outfall.
Yeah.
Yes, between those 2 points at those 2 depths.
Okay, and the point of that, if there is contamination being carried by stormwater, it's not going to get up there, is it? I mean, it's going to go through the culvert.
Right.
It's like here we got a pipe and, possible contaminated water flowed through the pipe. So you want to test above the pipe?
Now, let me explain that. The nomenclature of those lab samples are a little misleading. In 2006, they called it the culvert inlet and the culvert discharge, but the culvert discharge sample is not at the culvert discharge. It's at the base of that hill where a tree exists. So they labeled it culvert discharge, but that's actually probably 15, 20 feet down from the culvert. And so when we see the highest levels in the neighborhood at the culvert inlet, and then we see the second highest levels in the neighborhood, just 10 to 20 feet down from the culvert. We don't know for sure, but I think it raises a reasonable concern that it could be the pathway from the culvert, the storm water there, which no longer runs, but it did for quite some time.
I still don't get, if the pathway is the culvert, why test above the culvert?
This would be between the culvert and the sample that was labeled culvert discharge in 2006, which is actually toward the base of the hill. So
So what about the inlet? The inlet was mentioned.
Right. Well, I mean, I was trying to be respectful of the number of locations that you had defined, but if we're to be serious about this, then I would also test the culvert inlet, but I'm not here to kind of stir up that discussion again. But yes, the culvert inlet was the highest level in the neighborhood, even beyond all of the samples that Waleco took in the past year. And as we now know, Mr. Peckham, that is not fenced in, but that may not be on city property either.
So is your proposal to go to the actual physical outlet where the water flowed out of that culvert and test right there, instead of 20 feet down the hill like was done before?
The sample would be in the kind of forest area between where the culvert discharges and the park at the bottom of that hill. So it would be between the culvert and at the bottom of the hill.
Okay, I misunderstood that.
Sorry, it's the terminology there.
Okay, so
Well,
you want to go below the outlet of the culvert?
I think one sample would be warranted there since we knew that exceeded state standards by quite a bit in 2006.
Well,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I mean, we've had a, as we've said, a long saga with this, and I know we don't have a blank check or anything, but I would move to accept the addition of that test site that Mr. Killian outlined. Would like to get, the group's nod of approval for this and let us move ahead and get our data and just have at it, so. And I think it's a good night tonight to, pick our
Yes.
points and just go forward and do it, so.
This one from here.
Put some pins in the map. Mr. Smith, okay.
One concern. The green dots that are up there, that's the previous test, and did those show exceedance?
If I'm not mistaken, the two green dots in the culvert area showed exceedances. The others did not,
Okay.
not individual exceedances.
All right, then my question is, if we kind of already know, and I'm not trying to be negative on this, I agree with Mr. Neal, if this will put this thing to bed, we'll test it right there, but if the other ones already show exceedance, isn't it logical to construe that the one we're going to do is going to show exceedance?
I would think so, and then I would expect the city to deal with it like it should have 14 years ago, and that's not your guys' fault. You weren't sitting in these chairs, but that's precisely the point, that we knew they exceeded state standards by quite some amount back then. The city got them in 2008 and just didn't do anything about it. So it may show exceedances, and then we can do what we should have done maybe 12 to 14 years ago.
Okay, so basically, if we have the test results that previous show exceedance and we do these, then we have a comparison, has it gotten better, has it gotten worse, or so on?
Yes, and hopefully, maybe with the half-life, it's waned so much over time that there's not an exceedance there anymore. That would be the best hope, the best outcome, I think.
Great. I second Tom's motion, we should do it and go move on.
That was your motion.
Mr. Lindman, how much, what would we talking about dollars to go to 5 instead of 4?
Well, if we're gonna test both the surface and then down at 6 inches or the base of the A horizon, be another $700 to $800 for each of those tests, so another $1,500.
Okay, knowing the cost would be $1,500, is there a motion to amend to go to 5 tests, move the test the other one, as we previously discussed, and add one up near the outfall of the culvert.
That would be my motion.
Very good. Mr. Smith, second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. It's unanimous. Thank you. How soon can we have that package wrapped up and on our doorstep, Mr. Lindman?
I'll get
They
these,
can't test until April or something, huh?
right, whenever the snow is gone and we have good access to the site so we can see what's there, and then, I'll get the final cost from REI, and, if we have to ask for more money, we'll bring it before finance and move from there.
Thank you. Very good. Thanks, all concerned. I'm pleased that we are moving. Item number 6, discussion and possible action on naming the dog park, the Two Hearts Dog Park, and I'm betting Mr. Neal can update us on this one.
Thank you. Well, Jamie did include in our agenda summary, basic summary of what's going on with that, the reasoning behind it. In our January meeting, this proposal was brought to us by Brian Stoltzman, and he didn't just walk in alone, he walked in with a whole posse of people. It was, the room was full. And gave a very heartrending account of what it is they want to do and why. And I just want to invite Brian to come on up and maybe give us a brief summary, and again, thank you for your interest. Where this all stems from is that we, after our various funding efforts, we stand at roughly $34,000 short of our ultimate goal, which is all the bells and whistles the park could possibly have. The park's ready to open anyways this summer, but we've always kind of floated the naming rights in front of any potential donor, but nobody really bit. So the committee looked at this and kind of determined that if we cut our remaining shortfall, if you will, in half and offered that to somebody who wanted to name the park, and the group kind of jumped at it, and there you go. So maybe you can give us a progress report or just tell us, what's going on.
First of all, thanks a lot, and
Thank you.
good evening, and thanks for considering this. May I
Could you
pass out?
identify yourself and address this for our
Sure,
records?
3420 Horseshoe Spring Road, Wausau, 03, and Brian Stolzman, Deb's husband.
Stolzman.
You got it.
Very good.
Can I pass out a flyer
Sure.
with some pictures and that?
And the question before the committee is to pass on to the full city council the unanimous recommendation of the dog park committee to go with this name change. Or, I guess, naming. Didn't have one before.
Well, you do now. All right. So, first of all, Jamie did a great job in kind of telling Deb's story in a summary. I could stand up here for 2 hours and tell you about Deb's story. Basically, in a nutshell, less than 2 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with glioblastoma, grade 4 astrocytoma. If you don't know what that is, that's a good thing, because then nobody in your family ever had to deal with this, and it was terrible. Think John McCain, that's exactly the same thing. And she survived about 14 months. The one thing that I would like to point out is that if you take a look at the pictures, that tells the story better than I can. The one thing I would like to focus on is in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that little drawing. My wife did that after her second surgery. After about a year, the cancer came back, as it always does. Went down to UW-Madison, had a very successful surgery, but as so often happens, it was more the treatment that took Deb's life. The cancer did not come back when she passed away on July 22nd of this past summer. After her second surgery, we were outside, and I was trying to keep her mind active, and I asked her to draw me a picture, and she drew that. And I said, "Deb, that's a beautiful heart." And she said, "No, that's two hearts, you and me." So that's where the two hearts come from. So again, Jamie did a great job of telling the story about Deb's history, working with dogs in the community. The pictures, I think, do a better job than I can do right now. So family and friends, when we heard that Wausau was going to have a new dog park downtown. We thought, what a great opportunity to continue her legacy and do some really good things for the community. So in a nutshell, you know, that's it. I don't want to cry anymore. So if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them right now.
Committee have any questions? Ready for a motion?
Well, yeah, I will make the motion to accept the proposed naming of the park. I hope things are going well in your efforts, and wish you the best of luck. And because I know Jamie is looking at, you know, ordering signage and stuff. And
Right.
so want to be able to say, yep, you know, we're.
I can't go out in public since this kind of became a news story and not have anybody stop me and say, you know, what can we do to help? And for the most part, everybody's taken it upon themselves with GoFundMe pages and donation boxes and all that kind of stuff. I haven't had to do anything at this point, and the community just loved Deb, and she loved you guys and the community. So it's a great loss for all of us, but we're going to do positive things in her memory.
Very good.
All right,
Second to
there's
that
one.
motion?
I'll second that,
Mr.
Mr.
Nutting?
Chair.
Questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I say aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Unanimous in favor.
You bet.
Okay. Jamie's Polly is not here today. You may not have noticed that absence.
Oh, yes, we did.
We have Mr. Fricks with us for educational items, and can take it away from here.
Thank you, Pat. So just a little update on projects that our staff is working on up at Sylvan Hill. We worked with the Wausau Waterworks Department this last fall and put in a new water line for our snowmaking operation. We were lucky to partner up with the Granite Peak ski operation and borrow one of their snow guns. We're trying to see if we can make our snowmaking operation a little bit more efficient by adding an additional snowmaking gun. So that work is underway this week, and hopefully by the end of this week, we'll be able to have an answer to that question. Ice rinks are still up and running. Mother Nature has been kind of decent for all of us, so the groundhog is correct, I think, this year. So we'll keep things going as long as people are using the outdoor rinks, and so far this winter, it's been going gangbusters. Vista clearing has been tentatively put on hold because of the snow depth, but in the next couple of weeks, we anticipate getting back to that along the River Edge Trail and all of the areas we designated needing to be cleared.
Could you define that, sir, which areas are the specific areas you're concentrating on?
Sure. Last season, and we could provide that to the committee, or probably last spring, we went through our entire system on the city and the county side and designated areas that we named as vistas, typically along waterways, areas of interest where we already had benches or just areas in general that created a view opportunity to our customers. So with that list, we are currently going forward and clearing out those areas and keeping it on a routine maintenance agenda or a maintenance plan, so we don't get encroachment from woody vegetation and such.
Could I ask one question? I asked this of Jamie a couple of meetings back, and I don't think she was entirely aware of it, but a newly poured foundation, if you will, for a bench towards the north end of the trail by Winton. There was, is that it?
That's Winton Street,
Yeah.
yes.
I was going down there a lot when the weather was nice last year, for my morning walk or whatever. And I noticed, they put down a pad here, and then a bench was put in. But then I swear about a few weeks later, additional pad was poured, about 4 feet wide or so, right next to it. And I took that to be perhaps like a wheelchair accessible pad or something like that. Is that the case, and is that something normal that we will continue to do?
That is exactly the case.
Okay.
Whenever we have an opportunity to put a bench adjacent to a trail, we always put that extension on the concrete slab for ADA accessible persons or needs. So, yeah, good catch. Yep. And I hope you did notice we actually improved or we went to a different style of bench. It's a little bit more elaborate, if you will. So we're getting a lot of good feedback on that as well, so. So that's the Vista clearing, and then Athletic
Just one-
Park.
One note on the Vista clearing, I was pleased in that River Edge Trail Master Plan, I think they're all listed in there. There's quite a bunch of detail as far as where those all are, so.
Yeah, and I would second that pleasure noted, but with the clearing that has taken place presently, but then as the growth where that clearing has stopped, it's been very attractive for all pedestrians to see and just to be able to view the expanse of the river, allowing for the more mature trees which may be in there, those being saved if they are of value. But the more clearance, in my book, the better. But don't skimp on it, in other words, I'm saying.
Yeah. Along those lines, there has been a few questions come in about the vegetation plan for Barker Stewart Island. And I believe that's going to be discussed and dealt with maybe in the next few months. I'm not sure exactly when, but so, we want to make sure that that's properly done and invasives are discouraged. So, go ahead.
And then last but not least, Athletic Park, we are partnering with the Wisconsin Woodchucks for a lighting upgrade. Currently, a contractor is on site as of today. So next week, a crane will arrive and they will be replacing the outfield poles to improve the lighting for playability for the Wisconsin Woodchucks. And then, of course, there's been some preliminary studies and utility marking for the Phase 4 project up at Athletic Park. And the rest of it has been routine, if there is such a word. So it's been a fairly good winter.
Any comments, questions on the report?
No. I've got a
Very good.
Future agenda request.
Very good.
Oh, Mr.
Fire
Chair.
away.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, you have a question on the
I'm
report?
sorry, were you done?
Oh, no, I was going to ask
I just wanted to follow up with the cleanup that was done at the bridge leading over to Barker Stewart. When the river was drawn down, was all of that debris able to be finished and cleared out of there before the river rose back up?
Yes, we took as much feedback, if you will, from concerned citizens, but we did have a plan going into the removal of that debris. We removed as many pilings as we could that were exposed and that our staff could safely get to. So short answer is yes.
And that, was there the thought that it would be, was there any contouring done so that the flow could go through rather than be restricted on either side of the center? Or was that opened up on left and right of the center so that that debris wouldn't capture during high water stages?
We're still potentially going to have some debris getting caught in there because the river does fluctuate the flow. But I think we've come a long way in terms of getting the larger snags. And actually our crew and our staff, we've got a pretty good system in place now in getting that material out of there. We did partner with the Public Works Department, and between their operators and ours, we were able to fabricate some extra tools, if you will, to be added onto equipment, like on backhoes and such.
There's
So
a reach down.
correct.
Very good, thank you.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm requesting that the department prepare a report and possibly a feasibility study on reporting on usage of Wausau Park.
Yeah.
We're looking at, parking for Athletic Park and expanding that to the degree that we can. And that's contractually, necessitated. And, is it feasible that we can look at Wausau as movable, just to go elsewhere in the city or county? and that can be transformed into a parking area for the ballpark. So that would be an easy thing, or semi-easy thing to pull together. But we'd like to know how much it's being used, or its historical usage, and is it on the wane, that sort of thing. Because I've kind of gotten reports that it's not used that consistently.
Sure.
So just for clarity, you would like a report of what Wausau area youth baseball, how many games perhaps, and?
Yeah.
Okay. Just as a side and educational note, Mark McDonald with the Wisconsin Woodchucks has had a dialogue in the past with youth baseball on potentially moving that facility, but he has walked away from that request. So I'm not really sure what, but we can certainly get that information to you.
You know, and not only that, but its feasibility as a parking area, I mean, we'd probably have to put up netting between the light poles or something, so that, you know, we're not dinking, you know, cars out there left and right, or I guess just right. But, yeah, you know, just, is it something that we could look at doing?
Very good.
Okay.
Anything else from the committee? Is there the key motion of the afternoon oncoming? Mr. Neal moved to adjourn. Hearing no second, motion dies. Here we are. Try again. Mr. Nutting rose to the rescue. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
You didn't give